everyone, my name is Jade Galvin.
Alame Garcia.
Priscilla Ponce.
Espinoza.
What we will discuss today is the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. This amendment means that people have the right to possess weapons for their own defense. The United States has 88.8 guns per 100 people, or about 270 million guns. 22% of Americans own one or more guns. Americans' pervasive gun culture stems in part of the colonial history, revolutionary roots, frontier expansion, and the Second Amendment, which states a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Gun violence in America and make our families more secure and communities safer. It's just common sense that background checks should be required before an individual is allowed to buy a firearm. Yet Congress refuses to pass legislation to close loopholes that allow gun sales to proceed before background checks are completed. Under the so-called Charleston loophole.
While looking up the requirements to own and buy a gun, we've found out as long as you're 18 or over and have your ID, you can buy a gun. Only 11 out of the 50 states will run background checks before giving a gun, but they will have a waiting period before the gun is given. Proponents of more gun control laws state that the Second Amendment was intended for militias, that gun violence would be reduced, that gun restrictions have always existed, and that a majority of Americans, including gun owners, support new gun restrictions.
Gun control laws are needed to protect women from domestic abusers and stalkers. According to procon.org, 5 women are murdered with guns every day in the United States. A woman's risk of being murdered increases 500% if a gun is present during a domestic dispute. 76% of women murdered and 85% of women who survived a murder attempt by an immediate partner were stalked in the year after the murder or murder attempt.
Are also important. Second Amendment rights are important, but there are other rights that we care about as well, and we have to be able to balance them. Because our right to worship freely and safely, that right was
used in self-defense of the 29,618,300 violent crimes committed between 2007 and 2011. 0.79% of victims protected themselves with a threat of use or use of firearm, the least employed protective behavior. In 2010, there were 230 justifiable homicides in which a private citizen used a firearm to kill a felon compared to 8,275. Criminal gun homicides. Legally owned guns are frequently stolen. A majority of adults, including gun owners, support common sense gun controls such as background checks, bans on assault weapons, and bans on high-capacity magazines. A 2013 poll was taken by gun owners stating that they own firearms for the following reasons. 60% of people have guns for protection, 36% for hunting, and 21% for target shooting.
And the people who don't have them. That I don't think that it's the gun that makes somebody dangerous. I think it's the person's mentality. So I think that's my argument behind gun control or whatever it is that I think that it just, there's certain people that shouldn't have them, and how do we get there? You know what I mean? How do we get to that point? So, and how do we regulate that? I don't know. So, number 3 was Congress's use of its tax powers in the National Firearms Act an appropriate way to control guns. You know what? I haven't researched that, and I don't know enough about that to answer that question, unfortunately. Number 4, should the states have more or less power to regulate guns? I think that states, the reasoning behind the whole idea behind states is that people can live in areas that can choose to live where they are surrounded by other people who have similar beliefs. If they don't agree with the systems in the state of California, they can go to another state where they are surrounded by a community and people who run things the way they want them to be run. I think that's the value of having different states. And I think that's the value of giving states more power than the federal government. Because the federal government is kind of like if you would, it's one person, or not one person, but I mean it's one entity trying to tell everybody what they need to do all the time, and not letting people make decisions for themselves. That's kind of oppressive. But if you let the states and the people, because you can't really leave the United States, but you can definitely leave California and go to Nevada or go to Seattle if you don't want to live in the state anymore because you don't like the rules. So I think it's important that states have power to do stuff. Do I think that states should have more power to regulate guns? I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know that it would make a difference who regulates it. I think it makes a difference for people. I think it's important that people have the ability to choose. So I think that maybe, states should be able to, because then if you want to own guns and live in a state that owns guns, you can move to a state that owns guns. And if you want to live in a state where there's no guns, or guns are not allowed, you can make that decision and move to that state. So I guess what I'm saying is yes to states, but I don't really know. Number 5, if you wanted to guarantee an individual right to keep guns for self-defense, what would I have written? Well, I probably would have been more specific in the verbiage that I had written. And I think that's a common issue that's always argued about. But, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was specific, right? So it's, you could definitely articulate it better, and you could have said the right to bear arms for self-defense and a militia. Or a militia. Or, you know what I mean? There's different ways to write it, but...
Be safe! Thanks for watching!